Today's video is all about how to say no well at work. And when I say well, what I mean is in a way that is actually beneficial for your career. 3 parts to this. The first is knowing what kind of work you actually want to be taking on and what kind of work is in some way detrimental to your career. And this is not an overnight process. Don't think about the short term, because in the short term, we want to please others and it may seem like the best option for our career is to say yes to a certain opportunity. But actually, if we think that little bit further ahead, 1 year out, 2 year out, what is the kind of work that we want to look back on that we're pleased that we got under our belt? And what is the work that's not going to count for very much? And we need to start having that perspective so that we can first of all identify what is the kind of work we want to say yes and no to. So that's the first piece, is actually having a strategic handle on the type of work you want to do. And I just want to share that there are trade-offs here. So I was at a stage where at one point in an organization, I was being graded or rated on 2 things in a sort of a matrix. One was my client execution and the other was my team contribution. Now, I was also part of a dance troupe which rehearsed multiple times outside work. And I knew that if I was going to try and score top ratings on both elements of those, I was either going to burn out or I was not going to be able to attend my dance troupe, which was very important to me. So I made the strategic decision that I was going to make sure my top rating was in client execution. It doesn't mean that I didn't want to contribute to the team. Wherever I could, I obviously did. But I recognized that in 1 year's time, that was what was going to be the real critical factor when I was being analysed in terms of promotion. And if that wasn't top notch, then that was going to be much more problematic for me than if my contribution to the team was merely average. So I made that strategic decision. I had to bear the consequences. And longer term, I look back on that period and I think I managed to do great work. I also managed to have a life. And I managed to set myself up in the longer term with the kind of track record and projects that were going to make a difference in my career and where I could do my best work. If I had chosen to maximize in the short term both ratings and have a great sort of almost perfectionistic sense of satisfaction that I'd got all of the top ratings, I would have been compromising on things that were really important to me. So that's an example of the trade-offs that we do need to make. It's not easy and it does require strategic thinking. It also requires some bravery. So I also want to acknowledge that initially it's going to seem harder and initially it may feel like you've actually set yourself back. That's number 1. Number 2 comes from Cal Newport, who is a great writer and speaker on all things career. Cal Newport talks about the fact that if we have a really strong reputation and we're known for doing great work in key areas, we almost have a free pass when it comes to all those extras, and people start to know us for being great at what we do, and they respect, even if initially they don't like it, when we say no to the additional and potentially peripheral things. Again, that is not a position that we are going to arrive at overnight. And so it's more of something to work towards. And I do remember when I was progressing through the ranks from senior manager to director level, and a lot of the coaching that I was receiving at the time was saying, if you can be known and famous for a few things, you can get away with murder. I'm not advocating, becoming really slack on every other area, but I am saying that if you can start to get famous for certain aspects in your work, you will find it easier to say no. So this allows you to play to your strengths, make the most of the things that you're good at, and get known for a few things that allow you to become increasingly selective about the work that you do. So far, we've talked about figuring out what it is that you need to focus on work-wise, and also understanding that there are trade-offs, especially in the short term, to allow for long-term strategic use of our time. The second thing we've said is the more that we can become famous for certain types of work and certain strengths, the more we can then be selective in the work that we say yes and no to. And the final one, and this comes up a lot with clients, and I'm always surprised but not surprised that this is almost novel to them, is that my clients are really hardworking and very accountable people. And often I say to them, look, if you're in an organization and you're being put in a difficult position, you do need to put that back onto the people putting you in that position. What do I mean by this? For example, if your plate is full at work and your diary almost shows this, so I often advocate people time blocking their calendars, not just with meetings, but with delivery time. So saying, look, this project's going to demand 3 hours this day, 3 hours that day. Can you see that this actually doesn't allow much more bandwidth until this project is delivered? And once you're really clear about how your time is being allocated, when people ask you for your contribution on something else, short notice, taking on a new project, you can go to your calendar and you say, well, until this date, I am actually really fully scheduled. I am very keen to be of assistance though, so unless you want to move my time away from something else, I'm more than happy to come back to you after this particular deadline and see if it can be accommodated. What you're doing by doing this is that you're not shouldering all the responsibility here. It's not all on your shoulders if you are an employee or if you work for an organization. It's also the organization's problem. And between you and the organization, you need to work together to find a good form of resource management. Often organizations do well from their conscientious, very dedicated employees who don't say no. And I'm not saying, before I get attacked by all the organizations out there, I'm not saying that there isn't some merit in saying yes and contributing to the greater good of the organization. My point is just that if you are already fully scheduled and taking on more is either going to come at the detriment of your current work or of your work life and your well-being, then you can still express your real keenness and your real interest in the work by saying, as I suggested, I'd love to be involved. Can I come back to you at this stage? Or are you happy for us to have a conversation about some other things that I don't spend time on now so that I can focus on this? And that's also another way to manage it. And what you're doing here is it's not about whether you say yes or no, it's about having a really healthy dialogue about what you should be focusing on right now. So I hope that helps you view saying yes and saying no in different ways. And cheesy as it may sound, I always like to end when I'm talking about yeses and nos with saying no in that instance means saying yes to many other things. It means saying yes to having a life. It means saying yes to being able to really focus on the work you're doing. It means saying yes to not being stretched too thin on lots of projects. So don't think of it just as a no, think of it as a yes to yourself as well. And I hope you're able to try some of these things out and let me know how it goes.